Hey, I'm Evan, Head of Engineering for RMSTATOR. Today we're going to show you how to install a stator and a regulator on a 2007 Kawasaki Vulcan 900. These are popular bikes, there's tons of them out there, and they are very common to have stator failures especially. So we're going to show you how to change it. We've got our new RMSTATOR right here. And we're going to be installing our upgraded MOSFET voltage regulator on this bike. And we have a new gasket for the stator cover. So this bike is not real difficult to change the stator on, but there is a few tricks, especially to get the wiring free. So I'm going to show you how to do all that. So you can definitely do it at home. It's not an impossible job. You don't need any special tools, but you need to take a little bit of time to do it right. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and remove the seat, and I'm going to remove the tool. There's a tool tray, plastic tool tray right here underneath the seat. Comes out with 2 Phillip head screws, so I'm going to remove that as well. You just have to move some of the wiring out of the way, remove the screws, and lift it out. And then, let's see, what else? You want to go ahead and drain the oil, which I've already done, and then we can go ahead and get started removing all the stator parts over here on the side of the motor. So I'm going to get the seat removed and the tray out of the way. I already have everything loose here, so our next shot we're going to zoom in here on the side cover and start showing you the stator disassembly. Okay, so we're looking at the side of our motor here. To get started, we need to take off this outer cover, and this is real simple. It's just 5mm Allen head bolts all the way around it. It's a plastic cover with chrome. So I've already have all those removed except for one. So you just remove all those, cover pops right off, and you can set it out of the way. Okay, so now we're looking at 2 different covers. We have the stator or alternator cover right here, and then we have the pulley cover for the rear drive right here. We have to get both of these out of the way to get the wiring free. So you can lift the little tab here and get your wiring just kind of pulled out so it's loose. And then you'll have 4 of these long 5mm Allen bolts that hold the pulley cover in place. I've already loosened them and take them out. Then you can pull the pulley cover off just like that. Set it out of the way. Okay. So the easiest way to do this, there's a lot of discussion online about what people prefer, but to get to the wiring for the stator, it runs down here behind this bracket and behind the pulley. A lot of people I saw online were talking about cutting the stator harness in half up here and just fishing the wires through. You could do that, but the pulley's really not hard to remove, and especially if you jack up the rear of the bike at the swing arm just a little bit, you can get some slack on the belt, and it's pretty easy to remove and reinstall the pulley. So let me show you that. That's how I chose to do it, because I didn't want to cut the harness. So I already loosened this bolt here, and I'll tell you 1 second. It is a 27mm, and there is a little washer, locking washer behind it that has the sides bent up, and that's what locks this nut in place by having the sides bent over it. And the washer is splined, so it locks it all together. So you just use a screwdriver and you can tap down the end that's bent up. So I'm going to remove both of those. Okay, so the pulley just sits on a splined shaft here. So you can just kind of wiggle it and walk it off, and then push the belt back with your thumbs, and the pulley will come right off of the shaft. So I prefer to do this. Why cut the wiring on a brand new stator? So there, with that done, I can slide the belt back. And we're doing all this just to remove this tray right here. See, there's these 2 8mm bolts here. And let's see if I can do this by hand. I didn't loosen them all the way. There's one. And getting this bracket out of the way will... Oh, I'm sorry, there's 3. I missed one. So I guess I won't remove it in this shot because I'm going to have to get a wrench. But so there's 3 of them, and that removes this bracket out of the way, and it'll give you access to the rest of the stator wiring. So you can see here the stator wiring comes out of the side case, and it splits right here in 2 directions. One travels up here under the seat, that is plugged into the vehicle's harness. The other end travels down here behind the bracket and all the way to the front of the vehicle to the voltage regulator. So to fully free the stator, we have to get this whole wiring harness loose. Okay, so anyways, I'll remove that and get this bracket out of the way. And then the next step, really what you should do next is free all of the wiring, but that's going to be really difficult for me to show in one shot. So since we're already over here, I'm just going to show you removing the side cover. You'll need to remove your shifter linkage, which is right here on a spline shaft, has a 10 mil bolt. You remove the bolt and just pull it off the shaft. Get that out of the way. Then you have access to your alternator cover. It mounts also with 5 mil Allen head bolts all the way around. They are slightly different sizes, different lengths. So let me show you how I deal with that here. Use a piece of cardboard with a template and I draw in the bolt holes so I keep all the different links in the right position so it's easy to put back together. Okay. So with that done, it is really just a matter of wiggling the side cover around until you just get it lined up right. You're fighting the magnets in the flywheel. But you wiggle it around and you just get it pulled off. It's not difficult. So there's our stator in the side cover. You can see we have a totally demolished, burnt stator here coming out of the bike. And the next steps here are to free the rest of the stator wiring. So I'm going to remove the bracket. I'm going to get the wiring free here. The wiring is put behind some small plastic clips here. You'll need to free it. And then you need to go up under the seat. And Ryan, can you pan up right here? You'll see here the connector coming from the stator. It's a gray kind of rectangular connector and it just has a little tab you can lift with a screwdriver and then disconnect it. So the only other trick to freeing all this connector for the stator from underneath, and I didn't loosen it all the way, is to remove the key switch. So the key switch here mounts with one bolt. I think it's a 4 mil. And removing that, the key switch will be free and you can slide it out of the way. And then you can slide the top half of the stator wiring out and get it loose. So do all that, and then I'm going to get the rest of this free. You can go down here, Ryan, and show towards the bottom. So the other half of the stator wiring runs down here behind this bracket, runs underneath the side cover, just through a couple metal tabs here that hold it in place, and it's plugged into the voltage regulator at the front. So I'll actually on our next shot here we'll show you the front and we'll remove the voltage regulator so we can unplug it, and then I'll just be able to remove the whole side cover and put it on the bench to show you how to change it. Alright, so we're up at the front with the voltage regulator, so we're going to go ahead and install the new one, and we need to unplug our stator wiring from it. So the outer cover removes with 2 short 10 millimeter bolts. I've already removed the bottom one, so the cover's out of the way. And then while you still have the regulator mounted, you can unplug your stator wiring. I've already loosened it. It's just a little tab to lift, and I'm going to pull that back through. Okay, then the regulator just mounts with 10 mil bolts. I've already removed the bottom one. There's 2 longer bolts, and it'll come right out of the bracket. Okay, now we're installing on this bike our MOSFET upgrade regulator, which is a nice improvement over the original regulator, but it is a larger housing and it also has a wiring pigtail. So when you install this regulator, you can't reuse the original regulator cover. There's just not enough room. But I think it's worth it to put a better voltage regulator on this bike. So I have the lower bolt installed. This regulator will fit in place, and the top bolt goes in to mount it, and it's kind of a tight fit, so you have to pull back on the regulator a little bit to line up the mounting holes. And I'll just leave it loosely started. Okay, then the way I route these is underneath, and I'll tie the wire up, and I'll have the new connector mounted right here for the new stator wiring to plug into. So for now, I don't have the new stator installed, so I'm just going to leave all this loose. And like I said, with this new regulator, the larger one, you can't run the cover, it just won't fit. But we do have available stock style regulators in this exact same housing if you prefer to keep the cover, and they will still mount in the same place and be exactly like the original. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of the entire stator cover assembly, and we'll put it on the bench and show you how to change the stator. Okay, so we have the stator cover out and on the bench now. One thing I forgot to mention is to fully remove this, you also have to unplug your pickup coil right here, which is this short wires coming out with the blue plug, and it's clipped into that harness that was attached to the pulley cover. So you'll see it, it's real obvious. Just make sure you remove that. So now we have the whole side cover out, and I've already loosened all the bolts. The stator mounts with 5mm Allen head bolts, and then you have a wire clamp cover here to keep the wires away from the flywheel that mounts with 4mm. So I've already removed the bottom bolt. I'm taking the top one out. Get the wire clamp out of the way. Okay, I'm going to remove the 3 stator mounting bolts, and then I can remove the stator. So you'll see the one coming out of this bike is destroyed. It's just completely charred. So set that out of the way. Okay, you don't need to remove the pickup coil. It can stay just right where it's located. It has its own wiring harness and nothing needs to be moved there. So your new stator installs just like the old one came out. Find my wire clamp. There's a cutout here for the wire clamp, so you need to make sure you line it up right. There's the holes. There we go. So I'm going to kind of route my wiring over there, get my grommet in place. It just sits right on top of the grommet for the pickup coil. Okay, and then there. So when you put your stator bolts back in, make sure you use Loctite red thread locker on the end of the bolts. That'll keep them from ever backing out. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I'll just show you. Put the bolts in. Make sure you put your wire clamp bracket back in place. It just sits right here and keeps the wires out of the way. And use red thread locker on the 2 bolts for that as well. So I'm going to get that all mounted down, and then the only other thing to do, it's a good idea to replace your gasket on this cover. And make sure that you clean up the surface real well. This one's already pretty clean, but I'm going to use a razor blade and just scrape it and make sure that it's really spotless. And then when I reinstall the cover, I'll usually use a little bit of black Permatex black RTV that helps it seal even better. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all installed here, and then we'll go get the stator cover back on the bike. Okay, so here's our new stator installed in the side cover. I have some black RTV around here and on the gasket there, and I'm going to get it lined up and reinstalled. So we're not going to show that because I can't really get a good clip of it, but let me get it installed, and then we'll show you putting the rest of it back together. But basically you just kind of get your angle right. You got to fit in this outside to the right and then kind of push it into place. And there's barrel pins that will help it line up, so you really just have to move it around a bit until you get it lined up and it'll press in. So let me get that done and then we'll show you the next step. Alright, so I have the stator cover reinstalled and I have it tightened down with its 5mm bolts all the way around. I have the wiring for the stator coming out right here. It routes behind the backing plate here, and it splits into a Y right about here. So I have the part going up here to plug in under the seat is routed along the back of the cover here, behind the key switch, and up here behind the seat. And you can pan over here and show this, where it will plug into the mating connector under the seat right here. Just clicks into place and then it sets down in the front. You'll put your tool tray back here and your seat back on. Make sure here you reinstall your key switch. I still have it loose here, but you had to remove the key switch to have room to get the connector through. Make sure you tighten that back up. Okay, then over here, the bottom part of the Y of the stator wiring goes behind the backing cover there, the bracket, and it runs down here along and below the stator cover all the way up to the front where the regulator is. So I don't have it plugged in yet, but the connector's hanging loose up there. Okay, so then once I routed my wiring and put the bracket back in place to hold the wiring, I lined up my pulley and with the belt on it onto the splined shaft here at the back of the transmission. and slid it into place. So this is a little tricky. It takes a couple tries. It's easiest if you put a jack. I used a scissor jack back here underneath the swing arm, and that let me lift up the swing arm a little bit, which slacked out the belt just a bit. So that's just enough to get the belt loose enough that you can stretch it over the pulley splines and line it up with the transmission splines and slide the whole thing into place. Takes a couple tries, so don't give up. It does work, and it's way better than splicing the wiring. Then I reinstalled the nut and the locking washer onto the pulley, and I tightened it up. Okay, then we just need to install our pulley cover. So I'm going to hold the wiring out of the way here. You'll see there's a notch here in the pulley cover for the wiring to go through. I'm going to make sure my top wires fit in that notch. And I'll slide the pulley cover into place. So right about there. And then you'll reinstall, I'm not going to tighten these all right now, but you'll reinstall your 4 long mounting bolts. So then your wiring here just follows the little indentations and the cutout for it, and installs in place in the connector cover area right here. And this clip just kind of holds it all loosely in place. So I'll tighten these up and get the cover tightened up in place. Then your last step on the outside here is installing your outer cover, which is the 5mm bolts all the way around. And don't over tighten it because this is plastic, so it'll be easy to crack, so be careful tightening that. And the last thing you want to do is reinstall your shifter linkage. And I suppose I should have said that before installing the side cover so you have more room. So it'll fit wherever you line it up for your riding style onto the splines down here, and then you'll tighten up the 10mm bolt that holds it in place. So let me finish these last things up, and then we'll show you the side of it all buttoned up. Okay, so we have everything back together. Our regulator's plugged in, the stator wiring's done, side cover's back on, and the wires are routed. I don't have the tool tray or the seat installed yet, so we can clip onto the battery to monitor the voltage. So whenever we're working on our charging system, always check that everything's working when you're finished. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this thing on, and we'll watch the battery voltage. We should see well over 13 volts at idle, 13.5, something like that, or even higher would be better. And then as we rev it up, we should see upwards of a maximum of about 14.5, 14.6 volts. We may not, just depends on the condition of the battery. So as long as we're in the high 13s to 14s, everything will be looking good. So let's fire it up. Let me hold this. That's great. So we're idling at 13.8 volts. So our new stator and regulator are working great. And we'll go ahead and rev it up. Great. And we're seeing 14 volts or over as we bring the motor up. So we're not overcharging, we're not undercharging. Everything is working well, which is exactly what we wanted to see. So anyways, that's about it. Hope this helps, and you can definitely do a stator and regulator on your own Vulcan. So you can get the parts at rmstator.com, and let us know if you have any questions in the comments on this video. Thanks.